The Imperial Council fell silent when Empress Vaelith of the Syr'kaan raised her hand, not to speak, but to halt the execution. "Remove the blade from his throat," she commanded, her voice cutting through the marble chamber like frozen wind. The guards hesitated, their ceremonial sword still pressed against the kneeling human's neck. Ambassador Marcus Cole did not flinch. He had stopped flinching 3 years ago, when the last transport from Earth had been destroyed by the hegemony, when he learned his wife and daughter had been among the passengers. Now he knelt before alien royalty, accused of espionage he hadn't committed, and felt only a hollow curiosity about what death might bring. "Your Radiance," Lord Cyrus protested, his silver-scaled face twisting with barely concealed contempt. "This human was found in the restricted archives. The law is clear. The law serves the throne, Syr'kaan. Not the reverse." Vaelith descended from her raised dais, her flowing robes trailing behind her like liquid starlight. The Syr'kaan were tall, their bodies elongated and graceful, their skin ranging from deep violet to pale silver. But Vaelith was different, marked by the faint golden luminescence that pulsed beneath her skin, the sign of the eternal lineage. She stopped before Marcus, studying him with eyes that held 3 pupils each, arranged in a triangle. "You are the human they assigned to cultural liaison, the one who learned our language in 6 cycles. 4. Your Radiance." Marcus's voice was steady. "I had motivation. She tilted her head, a gesture he had learned indicated curiosity among her people. "They say your species lives briefly. 70, perhaps 80 of your years. Yet you spent 4 of them mastering a tongue you may never use again. I had nowhere else to be." Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of recognition that transcended species. She turned to her council. "Leave us, your Radiance," Syr'kaan began. "I said leave." The council departed in rustling silence, their disapproval radiating like heat. When the chamber doors sealed, Vaelith circled Marcus slowly, her bare feet making no sound on the cold floor. "You did not enter the archives," she said. It was not a question. "No, but you will not name who did." "No. Why?" Marcus finally looked up at her. The Syr'kaan Empress stood over 8 feet tall, her form simultaneously terrifying and achingly beautiful in a way that defied human aesthetics. But it was her eyes that held him, ancient, weary, and utterly alone. "Because Specialist Chen has a daughter on the colony ship," he said quietly. "She's 7 years old. If her mother is executed for espionage, she becomes a ward of the hegemony. I've seen what happens to human children in their care." Vaelith's luminescence flickered. "And you? What do you have?" "Nothing." The word came out without bitterness, without self-pity. Simple fact. "I have nothing, your Radiance. So I might as well have honor." For a long moment, the Empress said nothing. Then she reached down and, with her own hands, removed the ceremonial shackles from his wrists. The council would be horrified. An Empress touching a prisoner, touching a human, was unthinkable. "You will not die today, Marcus Cole," she said softly. "But you have created a problem I must now solve. I apologize for the inconvenience of my survival." The faintest curve touched her lips. Not quite a smile, but close. "Your species has a strange relationship with death. We have a strange relationship with everything, your Radiance. It's our defining characteristic." She gestured, and a side door opened. "You will be confined to the Eastern Tower. Comfortable imprisonment rather than execution. I will think on what to do with you." As guards led him away, Marcus paused at the threshold. "Your Radiance? Why did you stop them?" Vaelith's 3-pupiled eyes met his. "Because in 200 years of rule, you are the first being to stand before my council with nothing to lose and nothing to gain, and still choose to protect someone else. I found myself curious. Curiosity is a dangerous thing." "Yes," she agreed. "It is." Confinement in the Eastern Tower proved to be nothing like Marcus had expected. His chambers were larger than any apartment he'd occupied on Earth, with windows that looked out over the crystalline spires of the capital city. Food arrived 3 times daily. Strange but palatable dishes that someone had clearly researched for human compatibility. But what surprised him most were the visits. Empress Vaelith came on the 3rd day, unannounced and unaccompanied. She stood in his doorway like an apparition, her golden luminescence dim in the afternoon light. "You are not eating the Vrethil grain," she observed, glancing at his half-finished meal. "It gives me headaches." I didn't want to complain. She made a small gesture, and Marcus knew without being told that the grain would never appear on his plate again. "Walk with me." It was not a request. He followed her onto the tower's observation balcony, where the wind carried the scent of something like jasmine and copper. My council believes you have enchanted me, Vaelith said, looking out at her city. They whisper that humans possess some form of psychic manipulation. That you have compromised their empress. Have I? I do not know. She turned to face him, and for the first time, he saw uncertainty in her ancient eyes. I have ruled for 200 years. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I have negotiated with beings of pure energy and creatures that exist in 17 dimensions. And yet I find myself returning to this tower, to speak with a human who has nothing, and fears nothing. And I do not understand why. Marcus leaned against the railing, ignoring how high above the city they stood. Maybe because I'm the first person who's talked to you like a person in a very long time. Her luminescence flickered rapidly, the Syr'kaan equivalent of a sharp intake of breath. You presume much. I presume nothing, your radiance. I observe. You eat alone. You hold court, alone. Your own council fears you too much to disagree with you, which means they've stopped being advisors and become sycophants. And when you stopped my execution, every person in that room was shocked. Not because you showed mercy, but because you showed preference. You did something unpredictable and they didn't know how to react. Vaelith was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. The last being to speak to me with such honesty was my bondmate, Kethrin. He died 70 years ago. I'm sorry. The Syr'kaan do not remarry. Once bonded, we are bonded for eternity, in life or in memory. I have been alone since his passing. She paused. Your wife. The transport. Marcus's jaw tightened. You investigated me. I am an empress. I investigate everyone. She moved closer, and he caught her scent, like rain on hot stone. Alien but not unpleasant. You carry your grief differently than we do. You do not speak of them. Do not visit memorials. Do not observe the rituals of mourning. Yet I see it in you, Marcus Cole. I see it in everything you do. I stopped mourning when I realized it wouldn't bring them back. No, bah. You stopped mourning because you began waiting to join them. The accuracy of her observation struck him like a physical blow. He looked away, his hands gripping the railing. Is there a point to this conversation, your radiance, Vaelith? When he looked up, surprised, she held his gaze. When we are alone, you may call me Vaelith. I find I am tired of formality. That could be considered inappropriate. Then we shall be inappropriate together. She raised one elegant hand, her fingers long and multi-jointed, and after a moment's hesitation, touched his face. Her skin was cool, smooth, carrying a faint electric tingle. You fascinate me, human. You came to my world with nothing, learned in my language, accepted blame that was not yours, and stand before me now without fear or desire. What do you want? Marcus considered the question seriously. I don't know anymore. I used to want revenge, against the hegemony, against the universe, against God if there was one. Then, I wanted death. Now, he shook his head. Now I just want one day where I don't feel like I'm waiting for something that's never coming. Vaelith's hand lingered on his cheek. Then perhaps we are not so different after all. Over the following weeks, her visits became regular. She came in the evenings, after the demands of rule released her, and they would talk for hours. About politics and philosophy. About the differences between their species, about loss and loneliness, and the terrible weight of continuing when part of you had already stopped. Your species lives so briefly, Vaelith said one night, as they sat together watching the moon's rise. One day for me is nearly 1 year for you, when measured by our lifespans. A single revolution of your sun while I experience only the passage of hours. Does that make my life less valuable? No. She turned to him, and in the moonlight her luminescence seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. It makes every moment more precious. You cannot waste time, because you have so little of it. And you, I have centuries stretching before me. Centuries of council meetings and diplomatic crises and the slow grinding work of empire. She looked away. Centuries of eating alone. Without thinking, Marcus reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were cool in his grip, longer than human fingers, with an extra joint that allowed them to curl around his palm. She stiffened at the contact, but did not pull away. You don't have to eat alone tomorrow, he said quietly. Vaelith's luminescence blazed gold. Marcus, I know. It's inappropriate. It's politically disastrous. Your council will have collective heart attacks, or whatever Syr'kaan have instead of hearts. We have 3. Then they'll have triple collective heart attacks. He squeezed her hand gently. But you asked me what I want. And I think I want to have dinner with you. Not as a prisoner and empress. Just as two people who understand what it means to be alone. She studied him for a long moment, her three-pupiled eyes searching his face. Then slowly she squeezed back. "Tomorrow," she said, "we will eat together, and damn the council." The scandal was immediate and catastrophic. Vaelith dining privately with the human prisoner was one thing, eccentric perhaps, but excusable as intellectual curiosity. But when she began appearing with him at public functions, when she dismissed his guards and allowed him to move freely through the palace, when she was seen walking through the gardens with her hand resting on his arm, the council moved. Against her. "This is intervention," Lord Severus declared, standing before the full assembly while Marcus watched from behind a pillar. Hidden but not absent. "The Empress has been compromised. Human pheromones. Psychic manipulation. The method is irrelevant. What matters is that our sovereign no longer acts in the interests of the Empire. I act in the interests of the Empire every moment of every day." Vaelith's voice was ice. "I have sacrificed more for this throne than any of you can imagine. Then sacrifice this human." Severus gestured dismissively. "Send him back to his people. End this attachment before it destroys everything you have built. And if I refuse?" The council chamber went silent. Severus exchanged glances with the other lords, and Marcus saw the calculation in their eyes. They had planned for this. "Then the council will be forced to invoke the right of succession," Severus said. "Your niece Thessaly is of age. She has been groomed for rule, and she has not been compromised." Marcus stepped out from behind the pillar. "May I speak?" The council erupted in outrage, but Vaelith raised her hand. "Let him, Lord Severus." Marcus walked forward, his human gait ungainly compared to the Syr'kaan's fluid movements, but his bearing straight and unafraid. "You've spent 2 months gathering support for this moment. Bribes, promises, threats. You've built a coalition that you believe is unshakable. But I wonder, did any of you think to ask what the Empress actually wants? What she wants is irrelevant if she is compromised. She's lonely." Marcus stopped before the council table, meeting Severus's contemptuous gaze. "She's been alone for 70 years, ruling an empire that treats her like a symbol instead of a person. And when she finally found someone to talk to, someone who sees her as Vaelith instead of her radiance, you decided that was a threat to your power. You know nothing of our ways, human. I know that your species values honor above all else. I know that abandoning a bondmate, even an unbonded one, brings shame that lasts for generations. I know that if the Empress chooses me, and I'm not saying she has, then removing me by force would mark every one of you as oathbreakers in the eyes of your own culture." Severus's scales flushed dark with anger. "She cannot choose you. The eternal lineage does not bond with lesser species. Then there's no threat, is there?" Marcus spread his hands. "If such a bond is impossible, then I'm just a curiosity. A pet, perhaps. Unworthy of this much political energy." The trap closed, and Marcus saw Severus realize it. If he backed down, he lost face. If he pressed forward, he acknowledged that a human could be a legitimate romantic threat to the Empress, validating everything he'd been trying to prevent. Enough. Vaelith rose from her throne. "The council will recess while I consider Lord Severus's concerns." The lords filed out, their resentment palpable. When they were alone, Vaelith turned to Marcus with an expression he couldn't read. That was either very brave or very foolish, probably both. He walked toward her, stopping at the base of the dais. "I shouldn't have interfered. It's your throne, your people. But I couldn't stand there and let them— You couldn't stand there and let them take me away from you." Marcus swallowed. "Yes." Vaelith descended the steps slowly, her golden luminescence pulsing with each heartbeat. She stopped before him, close enough that he could feel the electrical field that surrounded her species. "I have ruled for 2 centuries, she said softly. "In all that time, no one has stood before my council and claimed me. Not even Catherine, who had every right. I'm sorry if I overstepped. Do not apologize." She reached up and cupped his face in both hands, her cool fingers trembling slightly. "Do you understand what you have done, Marcus Cole? You have declared yourself before the nobility of the Syr'kaan Empire. There is no taking it back. If you remain with me, you will face their contempt for the rest of your life. The rest of my life isn't that long, remember. 1 day for you, 1 year for me." He placed his hands over hers. "I'd rather spend whatever time I have with someone who sees me than spend centuries being invisible." Vaelith made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. The Syr'kaan expressed both similarly. "You impossible human. You wonderful, impossible human." She kissed him. It was not a human kiss. Her mouth was shaped differently, and her body temperature ran cooler. But it was unmistakably a kiss, full of longing and fear and a desperate hope that neither of them had felt in years. When they parted, Marcus was breathing hard. That's going to cause problems. Yes. Vaelith's eyes were bright with unshed tears, a physiological response her species rarely displayed. Many problems. Severus will not stop. He will find another way to remove you. Then we face it together. Together. She tested the word like a foreign language. I had forgotten what that meant. That night, Severus made his move. Marcus woke to the sound of his door being forced, to figures in dark armor flooding into his chambers. He fought. Of course he fought. But he was one human against 12 Syr'kaan warriors, and the outcome was never in doubt. They dragged him to the palace's lower levels, to ancient chambers that hadn't been used in centuries. Severus waited there, his silver scales gleaming in the torchlight. The Empress cannot save you here, he said calmly. These chambers are shielded from all communication. By the time she realizes you're missing, you will be dead, and I will have evidence that you attacked her guards in a fit of human madness. She won't believe that. She will have no choice. Her grief will pass, and she will return to her duties, and the Empire will be preserved. Severus drew a ceremonial blade. I take no pleasure in this, human. But some things must be done for the greater good. Marcus looked at the blade, then at Severus's cold eyes. You know, I spent 3 years wanting to die. After my wife, my daughter. I thought death would be a release. How poetic. But that's not what I want anymore. Marcus met Severus's gaze steadily. I want to see Vaelith smile. I want to make her laugh. Did you know she hasn't laughed in 70 years? I want to hold her hand and walk through those gardens, and show her that connection doesn't have to end in loss. The blade pressed against his throat. You will not have the chance. Maybe not. Marcus smiled, and it was not a kind smile. But I promised her I would face this with her. So even if you kill me, know this. You will have murdered the only being in this galaxy who made your Empress feel alive again. And she will never, ever forgive you. The blade drew blood. And then the wall exploded. Vaelith stood in the breach, her luminescence blazing like a small sun, her eyes burning with fury that transcended species. Behind her stood the Imperial Guard, not Severus's bribed traitors, but the old guard, the ones who had served her for 2 centuries. Remove your blade from him, she commanded, and her voice shook the stone. Or I will remove you from existence. Severus's hand trembled. Your radiance. This is a misunderstanding. You have made your move, Severus. Now I make mine. She raised her hand, and light gathered there. The power of the eternal lineage, the force that had made her Empress. Your house is dissolved. Your titles are stripped. Your allies will be investigated and prosecuted. And you will live the rest of your very long life, knowing that you failed because you underestimated a human. The guards took Severus away, still protesting, still scheming. Marcus slumped against the wall, blood trickling from the shallow cut on his throat. Vaelith crossed the room in 3 strides, and dropped to her knees before him, her hands pressing against the wound. Marcus, stay with me. I'm okay. He caught her wrists, stilling her panicked movements. It's shallow. I'm okay. I almost lost you. Her voice broke. I almost lost you, and I cannot do this again, Marcus. I cannot bury another bondmate. He pulled her close, and she came willingly, folding herself against him despite the blood, despite the chaos, despite everything. Then don't let me go, he whispered. Whatever happens, whatever they say, don't let me go. Never. She clutched him tighter. Never again. The formal bonding ceremony was held 6 months later, after the political fires had burned out, and the Empire had grudgingly accepted that their Empress had chosen a human. It was not a human wedding. The Syr'kaan had their own rituals, their own words, their own understanding of what it meant to join 2 souls across the void of space and time. But there was one moment that Marcus had requested, one human tradition that Vaelith had agreed to include. They exchanged promises before the assembled court. I promise to stand beside you, Marcus said, holding both her hands in his for as long as I live. Which, yes, is not that long by your standards. But I will make every day count. And I promise to cherish every day, Vaelith replied, her luminescence soft and warm, knowing that one day for me is 1 year for you. Knowing that your lifetime will pass in what feels like moments. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried across the chamber. But I would rather have moments with you than centuries without you. The court murmured. This was not how Syr'kaan expressed devotion, but then, this was not a traditional bonding. Your radiance, the ceremonial officiant intoned. You understand that this bond cannot be prolonged. Human lifespans cannot be extended by our medicine. You will watch him age while you remain unchanged. You will hold him as he dies. And then you will have centuries more alone. I understand. And you accept this. Vaelith looked at Marcus, at the gray already appearing at his temples, at the lines around his eyes, at the face she had come to love more than she had ever imagined possible. I accept, she said, because the alternative was never living at all. The ceremony concluded with the binding of luminescence, Vaelith's golden light wrapping around Marcus's wrist, leaving a mark that would never fade. A symbol visible to all Syr'kaan that he was hers and she was his. That night, they stood on their balcony now, the eastern tower converted from prison to private chambers, and watched the moons rise over the city. Regrets? Marcus asked. None. Vaelith rested her head against his shoulder, a gesture she had learned from him, one that still felt strange and wonderful. You? Just one. He turned to face her. I wish I had more time to give you. You have given me something more valuable than time. She touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines she would watch deepen over the years. You have given me presence. Every moment with you is full, Marcus. Complete. I spent 2 centuries going through the motions of life, and then you taught me what it meant to actually live. By getting arrested and causing political scandals, by seeing me. She smiled, a real smile, one she had relearned in the past 6 months. By refusing to see the crown or the power or the expectations. By looking at me and wanting only me. Marcus pulled her close. That was the easy part, and the hard part, convincing your council not to have me assassinated. She laughed, actually laughed, a sound that echoed across the balcony and made the night guards smile despite themselves. The Empress laughing was a gift to the entire empire, a sign that whatever had been broken was finally healing. They have accepted you now, she said. Grudgingly, but truly. The common people adore you, the human who won the Empress's heart. The nobles respect your political acumen. And Lord Dessen has begun campaigning for a formal human-Syr'kaan alliance, which would have been unthinkable a year ago. All because you took a chance on a man with nothing to lose. All because you chose to have honor when there was no benefit in it. She kissed him softly. I knew in that first moment, when you knelt before my council, ready to die for someone else's child. I knew that you were what I had been waiting for. How long were you waiting? 70 years. Her voice was quiet. 70 years since Catherine. 70 years of loneliness, of going through the motions, of wondering if I would ever feel anything again. She met his eyes. And then you appeared in my council chamber, stubborn and honorable and utterly unafraid. And I thought, perhaps this one. Marcus took her hands in his. I don't deserve you. You deserve everything. She squeezed his fingers. And I intend to spend whatever time we have making sure you know it. They stayed there until the moon set, and the sun began to rise, talking and laughing and simply being together. In the morning there would be council meetings and diplomatic crises, and the endless work of empire. But for now, there was only this. 2 people who had found each other across the impossible distances of species and culture and grief. Years later, when historians wrote about the reign of Empress Vaelith, they would note her many achievements. The peace treaties, the economic reforms, the strengthening of the empire's position in the galactic community. But they would always begin with the same observation. Everything changed when she met the human. And in the private journals that Vaelith kept, locked away where only she could read them, there was a single entry that she returned to again and again. Especially in the decades after Marcus had finally, peacefully, passed in her arms. 1 day for her is 1 year for me. She still waited 300 of her days. He wrote that once when he thought I wouldn't see. 300 of my days. 300 years by his reckoning of our lifespans. He didn't know I would find it until after he was gone. He was wrong about the waiting, of course. I didn't wait for him. I simply survived until he arrived. There is a difference. But he was right about this. Some things are worth waiting for. Some people are worth every day, every year, every century of solitude. Marcus Cole was worth all of it. And though he is gone now, though I will live for centuries more carrying the ache of his absence, I would not trade a single moment we had together. Not for immortality. Not for peace. Not for anything in this universe, or any other. He taught me that time is not measured in length, but in depth. And the depth of what we shared will sustain me for the rest of my very long life. That is his legacy. That is our story. And it was, despite everything, a love story with a happy ending, because every moment of it was true.